we no longer have to approve the minutes, is that right? So we'll just accept them with some corrections that, Carrie, you added some corrections, is that right?
I did. I suggested a couple of different things to Heather. It's possible that Heather's only capturing when a motion has been made. I don't know. You know,
Yeah,
CJ.
it's supposed to be very concise because to this point, and this could be a conversation going forward as we start to move into regular meetings in person again. But we have full video recordings, so anyone can go back at any time and
Mhm.
you watch the meeting verbatim. So I've been encouraging her to keep them short and sweet.
The sweet part could be hard. I'm just
Well,
kidding.
okay, short, concise, shall we say? Maybe not sweet.
So we have on the agenda here modification of the agenda. I mean, we've modified it enough, right? So let's go on to Pat and he can give us a summary of what's going on and if there's any way we can fit in.
I think the only person I don't know is David, and nice to meet you, Pat Terrell, Director of Lansing Parks and Recreation.
Hi.
What do we want an update on? You tell me and I'll provide whatever I can provide.
We were thinking just a real quickie on the master plan schedule and when the CAC would be asked to contribute and what kind of feedback would be most useful to you. That's kind of where we were headed.
Okay, so we're in the final stages of the draft plan. We did have a meeting on Tuesday, mainly on trails and connectivity of that sort of thing. So we're very close to finishing that. We hope to have it to you. I think CJ told me your next meeting is April 7th. Is that correct? So I think at that
Yes.
meeting, we'll give you the draft plan and you guys can review it and then make comments back to CJ or I, either via email or a phone call, however you want to do it, if that works. So that's where we're at in the stages of things.
Great. And just in terms of the little bit longer trajectory, do you imagine that we would have a couple of weeks to get back to you? Do you want it sooner than that?
I think the plan is to hopefully have it to the town board in that month of April. So you probably will have 2 weeks basically to review it, and then we will take those in consideration, and then hopefully we're going to pass it on to the town board then, and hopefully have it accepted or accepted, I guess is the best word for it, at the town board meeting in May.
In May. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Which
And may I ask, Pat, were you planning to just come and give the presentation, or were the consultants? Are we
I
coordinating
think
that with MJ?
I think it's gonna be a little bit of both.
Okay.
I'll certainly be there to do that.
Okay. Nice. Thanks.
Great. So when you say you'll have it to us, you're actually going to give us like a PDF or a Word
Yeah,
document or something.
we'll send you a PDF, hopefully through email, or we'll send you a link to go onto that. I think most of you have probably maybe you haven't, I don't know, seen the draft plan so far. I know Tom was involved a little bit in some of the other steps of this. So, yeah, we'll give it to you in a PDF form and then you can peruse it. It's right now it's 92 pages, so it's not small by any means.
Mhm.
It'll probably grow with the trails pieces that we put in this week, I'm sure. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting comments back from you and the planning board.
Mhm. Great. Great. So we'll give the CAC a heads up because that'll be a busy time I think for the CAC. We also had a question for you, Pat, about how you see your department working with the CAC in the future in regard to land, maybe land that would be used for parks and rec and trails. And, you know, I'm under the impression that maybe the committee will have fulfilled most of its responsibilities with the master plan.
I
that
don't-
We would mostly with your department.
Yeah, I don't know where all that's gonna go once we complete and have an adopted master plan. I have no idea where that committee is going to go after that. That's kind of up in the air at this point. But I see at least my department working closely with this committee and going forward. And I'll certainly, if you want me to sit in on meetings, I can do that. I don't mind being, part of these meetings. And if you guys have anything for me, certainly please reach out, and I'm looking forward to working with you on any project that comes along.
Great.
So are there any more questions for Pat?
That was easy.
Well, thanks for filling us in.
Yeah.
It's your first time.
Yeah, no problem. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions about parkland, about anything within the town that you think is in our department or wheelhouse. We'll certainly get back to you right away.
Great. That we appreciate that.
No problem.
Thanks so much.
Okay,
All
that's
right.
it. All right. Thanks, Pat.
Yep. I'll
Take
see you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye now.
Okay. Robin did say she might come late, right? I thought I saw something about she's coming, but it might happen late, a little later.
I didn't see
Okay, moving on to the work plan discussion. What do we want to say about that?
Sorry to interrupt, but I guess Ed is, he seems to have used the wrong link. So I'm just gonna, I sent him a link, but for some reason he's not queuing in. So I'll just work on that for a second.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll just say, Carrie, it's a little confusing because we get a YouTube link and we get a Zoom link, and I never know which ones we're supposed to tune into.
Yeah, so that's a sort of a template from the town for the public on the YouTube link, but we have our own link that's always in the email. We could change that system a little bit. Should I continue, in your opinion, CJ, to have the YouTube link on the agenda? Because that does not bring people into this meeting.
Nope, it just takes them so they can view it. I don't think, it's kind of up to you. This may be a more robust discussion, whether you all want to meet in person. You're an advisory body, so you're not really subject to the open meetings law. So if you did just want to meet in person and just stream your meetings, you could. If you wanted to meet via Zoom and not stream your meetings, you could do that. So it really depends on whether you want to keep this format going forward. So it's kind of a broader discussion, but.
I kind of like the idea of having the meetings public if people want to see what we're up to.
Yeah, I do too. It's just that the first link that came up when I was going back through my emails was the YouTube. So I watched the beginning of this via YouTube and then had to go back and find the Zoom link. So not a problem. Just probably me being stupid.
It's the same link every week, isn't it?
All the time. It's been
Yeah,
the same.
so just put it in, I just have it in my calendar, and
Yeah, I have 30 links are used each time every week. So it's hard for me to keep track of all of them individually.
Mhm. Okay.
Well, maybe in the future, right before the meeting, we can send out the link to everybody on the committee
Perfect.
as just as a separate email. That sound okay, Carrie?
I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know I go hunting around for it too. Okay, do we want to pull up the work plan and put it on the screen?
Mhm.
So while we're waiting for that, Tom, is all that artwork behind you by a single artist, or is that a variety of artists?
It's my mother-in-law and my daughter.
Lovely.
Are you getting that that link?
Sorry, just
There we go.
communicating with the people who are not on the call.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to go through this fairly quickly because it's mostly for all of us to just be aware of what's on our docket in the next couple of years, and in particular what's coming up in the near future. We have been coordinating with Lansing committees, and our conversation with Pat tonight was sort of an outgrowth of reaching out to the Parks, Rec, and Trails Committee. And it's good that we did, so that we know now that the master plan is going to be sent to us for comment. I'll just make a few comments as we go through this, and then I'll ask for questions. I communicated with the Finger Lakes Land Trust today. They are hoping to close on Bell Station in early May, and they would like to wait on scheduling any tour until they know that that's going to happen. They also are happy to show us sims, but again, they'd like to have trails in place, and they think that that's going to take them a good chunk of the summer so that they can get those trails in place. They're planning them now, then they have to render them. So that could be the fall, but it's still on our docket. Website, I think we can do more as needed. Overlay district we'll talk about today, along with the conservation easement guidelines. And of course, the OSI is another topic on our agenda for today. This community forest conservation grant program that CJ alerted us to and Robin reminded us about. I did have a conversation, Ed DeBovie and I both looked at this request for applications. It would be due in April. Right now, I don't think we have something that's ready to go, and we're probably not positioned properly. I asked Pat if there was something that was on his scope of work and his priority list. He was thinking that maybe the funds could be used for reforesting the gravel pit area that belongs to Lansing, but in fact, that's not allowed under the grant guidelines. Have to purchase from a private owner, and that's very clear in the guidelines. So for now, we're going to go with CJ's assurance that these funding opportunities come up pretty regularly, and hopefully, once we have prioritized land in Lansing, we can take better advantage of them. Some of these things will need people to be working on them. For example, moving toward a conservation board. That's a little bit in limbo now. Maybe we'll be better prepared with the OSI. This overlay district, we have been working on that, and we're going to talk about that tonight. We're working on one part of it. Some of these things are further down the road. Deer management is something that we could discuss. I got a communication from Paul Curtis assuring me that this is actually a pretty big issue. And it would be nice to get some feedback once I've strolled through this listing. And there's some annual responsibilities having to do with our membership, our reporting, and clean energy communities, which we for a while we're staying really on top of that with cooperative extension. It's been in remission for a little bit. And then, that gets us toward the end of our list here with some other responsibilities just that have been outlined in the legislation that brought us into being. So I'll stop there after this very quick overview and just maybe ask for questions and comments on the work plan.
Well, there's no shortage of things that need to be done.
Mm.
No, this looks great.
Oh, good. Thanks, Todd. Hi, Ed.
I'd be interested in the deer mitigation because I've got about 8 deer that just roam my property, which is okay, except I have about a 50-pound dog who wants to go racing through the woods after them. And maybe this year I can hold him back, but in future years, I don't think I'm going to have the energy to do that.
So my observation is there were an awful lot of deer in Lansing, and I don't know what other people are learning, but evidently Mike Roberts at Cornell prepared a deer management plan for the Tompkins County Environmental Management Council, and also coordinates the deer hunting plan for the botanic gardens and the natural areas. And Bern Blasi is also involved. So if people are interested, I can send out the materials that Paul Curtis pretty recently sent to me. And Ed, I'll make sure that you see those. And if somebody wants to begin working on this, there's certainly no harm in gathering more information. And I don't know how other CAC members feel. I realize we have quite a bit on our docket, but still plenty of room for enthusiastic members to bring us up to speed, I guess. Other comments?
Hey, can I ask a question about the unit management plans for, okay. So for conservation properties owned by the town, okay. So are you saying like areas that the town manages, like Salt Point?
Well, this came out of our town board resolution and their vision for the CAC. And I think these are just examples of existing lands, but my understanding is that this would be new acquisitions. Maybe I don't have that right.
Okay, no, I'm just asking. I was not here when that was created. I'll take a look at it, and I'm just trying to understand. Would the CAC be looking to be involved in the unit management plan for Bell Station? Is that maybe what I'm hearing too?
Interesting. Maybe we should be listing that.
I mean,
although
it won't be. Yeah, that's going to be owned by DEC, but I think maybe that's where I'm getting confused with the unit and brackets. No worries. I don't want to monopolize a conversation with this. I'll just look at the resolution.
And so do we know, what would it be DEC who would be in charge of the, scoping out the management of Bell Station?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Andy
Okay.
and Kelly may have more information, but that's my understanding is that there would be a union management plan there, and then there would be kind of like Salt Point, an agreement with the town to do some management as well.
Okay. All right. Other comments on the work plan? Okay, it's
Okay,
meant to be both guidance and record so that we have a sense of what comes up annually, what's on the docket for the future, and where our priorities are. So just mostly making us aware of it on kind of a regular basis. Thanks.
okay. Any other comments about that? So the overlay district for the scenic byway. I sent something out last week, and then with the help of Karen, I changed the text to be more accurate, and I sent it out again this evening. The only thing that changed was the first 2 paragraphs of the text, but I can pull it up, I guess. Let's see here. Is that showing up on the screen? Shoot, no.
We're seeing something different.
Oops.
Whoa.
Now it's about half of the report.
Let's see. Well, if somebody else can pull it up, I'll let them try. I seem to have bungled it here. No share.
Tom, are you trying to get the PDF up that you
Well,
sent?
I had it in Word, but yeah, if you want to put the PDF up, that would be good because.
Okay, you need to unshare your screen then, and I can do that.
Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. I don't know. Can you see that now?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Karen.
So just tell me what you'd like.
Well, I don't know if people had a chance to read this new version because I just sent it out tonight, but that's basically the main text. And then the rest are pictures. And this is just a response to the meeting we had on January 10th. One of their requests was they wanted to see the view sheds with the foliage on. And so this was a response to that, and I haven't sent it to the planning board yet. Just wanted to see if everybody was okay with it. And I did mention last time that I was hoping to get out and take some pictures along the scenic byway. Because we don't have foliage on at the moment, I wasn't sure that was a good idea, but I still think it's probably a good idea to add pictures to it. Especially the views that we think are important. And we can send that on to the planning board later, which is sort of what I proposed in the last paragraph there.
Tom, do you have time to go around and take pictures? Because I personally think it would be very helpful to have the pictures with the foliage on, because it's not just leaves, it's the presence of the trees.
Well, yeah, I mean, I could make time, but there's no foliage on is the
Like
problem.
you said, it's not just the leaves, it's the presence of the trees. And the trees, if they see the trees, they can imagine the foliage blocking it. Otherwise, it's just bare earth or
Okay.
tall
So
wall. So, I mean, if you have time, they're kind of asking for something that's it's both not entirely reasonable right now, I think, and it's not helpful that we give them view sheds that are not, the modeled ones that are just going to use them. So I really do think that seeing the trees in the way will go a long way.
okay.
As long as they're not totally blotted out, you can't see them in the photo, but it depends on what everyone else thinks. I would suggest it. I think it makes us look like we're doing our job better.
Yeah.
If we have that.
Well, I can try and get out in the next couple of weeks and do that. I don't think this is something that the planning board is looking at right away anyways. So I believe there's time to do this. Yeah, okay. So I'll take some pictures hopefully within the next month.
If time allows, yeah, if you have that kind of time.
Yeah, well, I'll try and make time for that. But yes, I agree. It's probably having pictures, even though the leaves are not on, is probably more valuable than the view sheds that don't really work too well. The other problem with pictures is we're only seeing a small part of what you're looking at with a picture, whereas you're not seeing the whole thing. But yes, that's a picture is probably better than a view shed that's not doing a very good job. So, okay. So I'll try and get something out to people before the next meeting for sure. And then my feeling is we can just put it on a website and or send it directly to the planning board, or they can go to the website and look at it.
So, Tom, I think we need to provide interpretation to the planning board. Because it's taken us a couple of meetings hearing from Karen about the limitations of the model. And they were pretty married to their suggestion for us. And I think it would be wise.
Well, that's what's here so far, but I agree with Karen. We should give them more than give them more than that, give them actual pictures.
Yes, I agree. I agree. But then they were hoping that we would come back to them. And so maybe we should get CJ's opinion about whether we go back to them with the code revision committee's blessing, or we just go back to them. How should that unfold?
That's a good question. I think the continued collaboration with the planning board is really valuable, and I think it'll really set up the process for when the code revision committee is ready to move on from the current work on the RA and Ag zoning district into this next step. So now that said, they're not going to have time for this until at least April 11th.
The night neither are we.
Okay, no, just saying.
Yep.
In April, I think it's going to be busy for you guys with the interviews and selection process. So
okay.
maybe more
So
like May 9th.
okay. What do people think about just getting on the planning board's agenda for May 9th? Would that need to be in person, or are they still going to have will they have a hybrid?
I haven't had a chance to talk with planning board about that yet. My guess is that we're going to go back to fully in person, because that definitely is a public body subject to the open meetings law. So
Okay, so we would need someone who's willing to maybe go there on May 9th. You know, obviously, Tom, you're going to be there, but in a different capacity.
Well, I'm not comfortable with scheduling something until we have something more to show them.
Okay.
If I can get this done in a week or so, then fine, there's plenty of time, but I think the planning board is going to be super busy.
Mm-hmm. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our meeting on Monday went for 3 hours.
Mm-hmm. But if I'm hearing you, CJ, you're saying stay in touch with the planning board. Yep.
Yeah, you know, if we get this done and we put it up on the website or give it to them through email, I would think they're going to look at it.
yeah, I would say it's really marvelous to have as much all this background and kind of the really foundational pieces of it, so that the code revision committee will be able to take this and run with essentially all the work you've done, and then start that iterative process with you and planning board. And I think it'll go a lot more smoothly with all of this foundation that you've put forward.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to join me with this, they're certainly welcome to. We'll work out time and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole point of doing these maps and doing these photo shoots was not to provide something that was comprehensive. It was to provide an idea what the overlay zone might look like from a couple of different places. And I think that they are possibly confusing that this is representative of everything along the, you know, whatever it is, 10-mile stretch of road. And it really isn't. You know, those spots and those view sheds were meant as a way for us to make our recommendations about the width, and really nothing more than that. And, you know, in a sense, it's like, it's a proof of concept, but it's not the analysis itself. And I don't know, I kind of feel like we're talking past them, but I think we're also talking past each other in some ways on this committee as we ponder what the best tools are to make this recommendation. I don't know if anyone else is feeling that way, but I do keep bumping up against that.
Yeah, Karen, I don't know if I feel exactly the same way you feel, but I do agree that we always have this problem. We use computational tools to try and convey something, and people take that as sort of a gospel interpretation of what the reality is. And so that's why I think the pictures are really good. And I think the thing we want to emphasize, and Tom, I'm happy to go out with you if I'm available to take these pictures. These are indicative of the types of views, and these change over time. They change over the course of a year, and we'd be happy to fill in, examples from other seasons. But we're just trying to show you, like, this looks like an important. And to not take any single photo or any single model as the end all interpretation.
Okay, well, we'll get some pictures.
I think pictures would be really good.
Okay, I apologize for not getting it done before this meeting.
It's okay. We talked about you behind your back, so don't worry about it.
Okay, I feel better now. So do we want to add anything more to that discussion? Are we okay?
Well, I feel a little unresolved about whether we're just giving this to the planning board or whether we are interpreting. And I feel like we've been getting a short course from Karen about the limitations of the model. We will be using the model and the photographs, correct? I think we would benefit from interpreting for the planning board the limitations of the model.
That's in that text.
Okay. So is there the general sense of the CAC that we do not need to do that in person? I mean, just showing up in front of them as human beings does seem like it has value.
Yeah, let's see how awesome Tom's pictures are.
Okay. We can move on.
Okay. The conservation criteria for the town of Lansing. Robin, I thought you did a nice job of slimlining the thing, and I think it looks good.
Yeah, sorry I had to miss the first part of this meeting, but I made it back in time to talk about this. And I'm not sure if anybody's had a chance to go and look at the newest version, but what I did was incorporate the feedback, except for Todd's, whose feedback I didn't have a chance to incorporate yet. But trying to make it look like a form that you may, actually, maybe it doesn't need to be a form, but trying to reduce it to the point where it's a simple thing that we could, print off, check off, and evaluate a site. So do you want me to bring it up on the screen here?
Yeah, you can. I thought it was fine, Robin, the way it is. I mean, there's sometimes when I feel like if something gets checked off, something else is automatically included. But I thought you streamlined it enough that, like, let's just go for it. This looks really good.
Okay. Let me just try to figure out how to share that screen.
I hope you have better luck than I did.
It doesn't help that I have a million tabs open.
Difficulties tonight.
Yeah, I had to change computers because when I first logged into the meeting, I couldn't hear or see anything, and I had to jump over to my work computer, and now I got to get all the tabs up on my work computer. So, okay, hopefully you're seeing a familiar form that looks like this old form, which all I did was just kind of clean up all of this feedback and put it, so it's all still there. So if you want to go back and look at the old version, you can. And then this was just sort of the new version now with additional comments. So, name, property, parcel, tax ID. I moved the acreage down here because we discussed having some points associated with larger parcels. And so the rubric of points was one of the things that was pretty unclear about, 2 points or 1 point. And I guess it's still maybe a little unclear, but what I did was make a column for points in the rubric and then a new column right next to it where you would put like the parcel's score. So if it was over 5 acres, they get a point here. If it was less, they just wouldn't get any. So I don't know, is that helpful to have it just side by side like that?
I think it is.
I think it's really clear. Yeah.
Okay. So the idea is that you would go down, you would fill this in, and then it would sum up everything, so if you get 3 or 2, it would sum it up down here. And so it's keeping track of your little score. See, Todd has some questions in here about things being mutually exclusive, and the answer is no. Some of them are additive. So if you've got like a little wetland, you might get a point. If you've got a bigger one, you might get extra points, or so they're not mutually exclusive. I think the way the one that we modeled it after was set up that way as well, so that you just get these additive points. And I don't know, I didn't really have time to properly look at your feedback, but
No, yeah, don't worry about my feedback. It was just,
think-
this is my stream of consciousness as I look through it.
I think the answer to this question is that they are additive. So I know CJ was not present for most of the discussion that we had about this last month. So if there are questions now, I can talk about them. I know we sort of had this debate about this and there was some feedback, but I really wasn't sure how to interpret all the feedback on it. So I just kind of left it. The question is, was it a negative point if they had an extractive resource, or did we just ignore that? I really wasn't sure what to do with but most of the other topics had a consensus across multiple people's comments. So in most cases, I went with a consensus. If most people thought it was 3 points, I would put 3 points. But this one, there wasn't a ton of consensus about, so I'm still sort of wavering on this one. And then I just moved a couple of there was a comment that I just left in here so that I wouldn't lose track of it. So this is what it looks like now. And I guess the maximum score is 37. If this scoring system makes any sense to people, hopefully it does. So that, it's a little silly because why are they just 2 points instead of just 1 point? I don't know. Some things we thought were more exciting than others. So in practice, I don't know how this is going to work. If we have, let's say we're evaluating 2 properties, or, and one of them scores a 28 and the other scores a 32. Are we really going to say no to the 28? I'm not really sure what to do with this information once we have given it a score. So I'm not entirely sure what to do with that data once we have it, but these are the things that we agreed were important to look at, and everything we agreed was not important is gone now in this version, except for this guy, which I'm not sure about. So that's where we are. I don't know if Todd or Karen wants to chime in about any of it.
Well, you've done a great job filtering through a lot of confusing stuff. I guess the question that I hadn't even gotten to thinking about until just now is, do we have a threshold that this property needs to exceed? So, you know, regardless of whether we're comparing two, is there an absolute? And I don't have an answer for that. So that's one comment. The other comment is the first item, acres included in the proposed conservation easement. I'm not so sure giving it 1 point or not actually really matters. I mean, I just think we should not be, except under extreme unusual circumstances, even be considering anything whatsoever under 5 acres. But I don't know, even if we do, I don't think that first item has value in a mix of 37 potential points.
I remember having a discussion about that and whether we would have a minimum. I understood the consensus to be that there would not be a minimum imposed, but maybe I got that.
That was my understanding.
All right, that's what you want.
Okay, I see Tom suggested a 1 acre minimum. Oh, no, I'm sorry, scrolling way off. Tom suggested it in the comments, and then I have a note here that we overruled CJ's comment about this parcel must be developable. So I guess that was not something that the group wanted to formalize as a criterion in this document.
The parcel doesn't need to be developable to be a conservation easement.
Okay, so I think that was what that comment was. And then the only other comment I had about it was a minimum of 1 acre. But I remember the discussion being maybe we don't have a minimum.
All right.
So does that still hold? I kind of see your. Go ahead, Carrie.
I think we were concerned about a special circumstance of a very unique small parcel. And I think a couple of people said, wow, it could come up. And if we just have a flat no right off the bat, and we could be kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. Todd, you also had some comments about very unique.
Yeah. Well, I think Robin really convinced me with that. The fact that like a term habitat is not there isn't like a unit that represents habitat. And so I thought she made a good case that there could be very small parcels that maybe that's the salamander crossing for this whatever.
Right.
And so I like not having a minimum acres, but I think this is what our committee is about. If all of a sudden we get thousands of people that want 2 square feet of their land designated, well, then we have to come back and revisit this. And then we go to Karen's point, which this could become untenable. But I don't think we want to anticipate a problem until it actually occurs.
And that may be, I believe that is all true. I'm just saying I don't believe that item has any value because it's based in like more subjectivity than any of the other pieces. We're saying, okay, if it's, our preference is over 5 acres, but we will consider some of us will consider under special circumstances, something under 5 acres. I just don't think that I don't think that it's actually a metric the way the other.
Okay, so Karen, you're saying we should just get rid of the size criteria at all?
I think that, I think that we have where we have a discussion about that, but I don't think that it's actually a metric.
It was up here as like a basic information, and then somehow there was some. Oh, I see. It was 3 points, but really, it doesn't matter how many points it is because it's a point or it's not a point, really. So, and then CJ also had a comment about a minimum acreage. So CJ was with you on the minimum acreage. I'm seeing that now that I've scrolled up. The Zoom is covering it before, but I see that comment here now. So I had something in here about it points or no points. So given that it's a static yes or no thing, I just went with 1 point or no point. But if that just really doesn't make sense because it doesn't, if we're not, I don't know, if we're going to consider like a tiny little parcel with an endangered flower growing on it that's an acre, and that's really important to us, then maybe I can see Karen's point as a separate issue, that you just don't give it a point. It doesn't really matter. The metrics don't really matter. If we're either gonna consider it or not, based, and there's no minimum. So
yeah, the only reason I like keeping this in is actually to Karen's point. Like, if people are going to actually fill one of these things out, they're going to think again if they have like just a tiny parcel they want to put on this, and maybe that is a deterrent to them for even filling this out. Because I think that's Karen's concern, is that we could get bazillions of tiny little parcels suddenly that everybody wants to have an easement on, and so at least lets them know that we're like, really, if you're going to have a tiny parcel, you better make a good case for it. But that could be part of the dialogue above the sheet too.
But Todd, your point.
There are some cases in which, even if it is a single instance of, yes, I agree, there may be a single instance of some, like, completely rare orchid that is found nowhere else in upstate New York, and somebody's got it on their 1/4 acre. But if it's, a 1/2 acre or 1 acre, whatever parcel, and it's a nice little bit of habitat, I don't even, amid a sea of development, I don't really think that there's necessarily grounds for having a conservation easement on something that's tiny of an island, because there's no hope in that case of actually creating a viable population, because it's so limited by development around it. And that is also an extreme case. I just, after having done this sort of stuff for years and years and years, it's, like, there's lots of people out there who love their backyards, and they will make a passionate case for it. And honestly, as a advisory body, I think that we need to distance ourselves a little bit from that level of emotionality.
That may be true, but again, I think, like, let's wait until we see that there's a problem with this before we we can always come back and say, okay, it has to be over 5 acres, because we get lots and lots of these cases like you're presenting. But I think to discount it out of hand when we don't see any, we have really no problem a priori, is maybe presumptuous too.
I would lean toward giving it more points, actually, so that it's greater than 5 acres. It gets 4 points, and that makes it seem serious about considering parcels that are larger than a postage stamp. And that also does something else for us, which is 37 points as a sum is, I think, a little hard for people to wrap their brains around. We're sort of conditioned for round numbers, 50, 100, not to be too simplistic here, but you're right. Like when you're comparing 28 versus 33 out of a scale of 37, it just gets that's a little funky to me. So I would round number. I for a round number here, but I think there's some justification for saying, hey, as a CAC, we don't want to rule out that orchid patch that Karen's referred to. On the other hand, to have a whole bunch of little teeny tiny conservation easements is not necessarily even ecologically sound. We should put our energy, our time, our money toward those that are larger.
I like that suggestion myself. I think that even points don't matter, but in a way it is a little way of weighting things, and then also, as Carrie mentioned, it does bring us up to 40, which is a nice, not a bad idea. And I think it makes it pretty clear that we're really not too in favor of really tiny patches. And we can, and also coming back to what Todd and others have said, if it becomes a big problem, we're still getting swamped, we can go back and decide to, change that, make it a minimum or don't bother. So I do like the fact that we have, you've kept a little thing about additional notes at the bottom. So that could be, I like that we could have some qualitative comments there, because there's probably, in most cases, in fact, I would think the people interested in doing this would want to bring up something special that doesn't quite match up with the things here, but we don't want a laundry on the other hand, I like the way, Robin, you've kept it really simple. We don't want to have every possible thing under the sun that some reason why something might deserve it, but the additional notes allows people to give it a little extra push by some comments. So it's good. I think
Totally agree.
and I think we should see, it's a work in progress. I mean, I think maybe we can all agree, if we have to vote on it, that's not etched in concrete. We will see how this goes, and we will, change it if we're running into problems because it's not working out just right.
I think I heard an interesting remark from Todd that, if I heard correctly, it raises a good question of whose job it is to fill this out, because it sounded like Todd said the homeowner is filling it out. My kind of assumption is that somehow we would fill it out, because how do they know if it's in a unique natural area or is adjacent to a town conservation easement? Like how would they know that? So I guess that's a good question of whose role it is to fill this out.
I assume we would get input from the owners, but that we would fill it out. We would go over this with the owners, is kind of what I would think. So we
would meet with them and do it together?
Well, we'll get some input from them, yeah.
Or would this be like a Google form on our website, and they would fill in the Google form, and maybe there should be a checkbox where I don't know. How would we implement it?
I think a lot of homeowners might not be able to answer all the questions appropriately, or they might, but they can't just self-evaluate. I mean, I think, I don't think that's gonna.
They would also be biased.
Yeah, right. So we can't leave it just up to the owner.
Yeah, I think and Robin, you're absolutely right. I brought this up at the last meeting that I didn't know who was going to fill this out. But the homeowner's the only one's going to know that there's like the secret orchid that only exists one place on the planet on their land. So I don't think it could be totally independent of the landowner. Right. But I think Dave's right. It has to be something like perhaps they show an interest, and then we send Dave, because he's retired now, over to help them fill this thing out.
I don't feel like I'm retired. I feel like I'm working a lot, but yeah, I guess.
Is it almost like a situation like a federal government form, where like they fill out the top half and then we fill out this part? Don't write in this part because we do this and only we know this stuff. So I could envision some kind of split scenario where they answer the questions that require them to have input, and then we can go in with the tax parcel maps and wetland maps and see if they've actually got a wetland. I don't know. I think it's a really interesting problem of who I'm thinking, how would I answer this on my property? Some of them I don't know. I know the acreage, and I know there's a stream, and I know there's the forest cover type, and there's some migratory birds, and but I didn't realize until Karen and I had our first meeting about this that my property is near a unique natural area. I had no idea until she told me. And which one was it, Karen? It was something to do with Ladoga.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I don't know how I would answer these questions. I may be able, some of them I would answer, and some of them I just wouldn't have any idea. So that, it could be a situation where they fill out the top half and we fill out the bottom half, or something like that.
Well, I'd be interested in getting CJ's take on like the long-term vision in regard to the town, because it seems like if the town is going to be in charge of monitoring conservation easements, who knows how many years in the future, once capacity is developed, then wouldn't town staff want to have input into this, something like this form?
Yeah, I did add my comments.
Right, and they've been incorporated. But for the actual filling out, I mean, this is all futuristic and we're using our imaginations here, but in the future, do you imagine that a staff person would fill this out, maybe with a CAC member and input from the homeowner? In a perfect world.
Sure. In theory, absolutely. I think I would probably start with the open space index and conservation plan and kind of see, what work comes out of that. Yeah, I mean, as it stands right now, I mean, I was very transparent about my take on the town's capacity to be able to handle these conservation easements. So.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you, CJ.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, and I want to, and I did see the comment. I thought it was really sweet about the overruling CJ comment, but the rationale for that is that the town and the way it acquires land is different, say, than the way a nonprofit or another type of agency can use public money to acquire land. So that's the key difference there and why we need to demonstrate public benefit. So I'm not saying, essentially what I'm saying is that would help be a base criteria in some situations where there may be a bond or Carrie and Tom maybe can go into this a little further because they did correspond with town council pretty extensively about the different funding mechanisms. And we'll get into this as part of the open space index, helping flesh out all of those different pots of money and the way they can work together to acquire private land. So that's a little different than the way someone like or an organization like Finger Lakes Land Trust, for instance, would acquire conservation easements. So I just, I have to say, it's a big lift as it stands right now to go out and just do the county held conservation easement monitoring that we're responsible for every other year. It's, yeah,
So
we're not actually acquiring the land though, right? We're just acquiring the easement on the land. The rights, the development rights.
It kind of depends on the strategy. Yeah, I mean, in some instances, it may be a fee simple acquisition, and in other cases, it may just be a conservation easement. And normally, when people want to have conservation easements on their land, you start to get into somewhat tricky tax issues, with federal and state tax credits. Sometimes people want to donate the land so that they can take the write-off from extinguishing the development rights. And so the town really needs to be, I see this as a very advanced, long term. I'm thinking on this, but I think it's really savvy to start thinking about it now, especially in context, when at the point where you're starting the open space index and conservation plan. This can really start to kick that process off nicely, I think so.
So CJ, just to get back to your comment about whether a parcel is developable or not, we had some pretty extensive conversation about that the last time we worked on this grid as a CAC. Do you feel like without that criterion in there, it's not workable for the town?
It's a good question. I just know that when it comes to the way people are going to use tax credits, and the way that the town could possibly use reserve funds, there's kind of a tricky set of rules under Virginia municipal law anyway, this is probably a broader conversation for town council, when you guys get further into this, because there's got to be essentially, and there may be many ways to show this, but there has to be essentially that public interest for the town to be able to spend taxpayer dollars on acquiring property, if that makes sense. That's really the foundational of what piece of what I'm trying to say.
I think this piece was missing from our conversation last month because you weren't here, CJ. I don't think any of us realized this had anything to do with, well, I'll speak for myself. I didn't realize this had anything to do with funds or acquiring property. From what I understood from others who have done it, is that you pay the town and you pay for it as the homeowner, not the other way around. So maybe I'm just going about this the wrong way. I don't remember that being part of our conversation at all last month.
I just mean to say there's a lot of different ways for the town to come into rights on land, is what I mean to say. And it kind of depends on the way the town comes into it. Like whether it's donated or whether it's acquired or whether there's public funds being expended for it. So that's why I think it'd be helpful to, and maybe town council would be willing to attend as you get into the open space index, to kind of dig into that portion of it and think through those guidelines a little. In fact, I think Town of Bethlehem did a really nice guide on, and I may have sent it around, I can't recall, but on the funding and tools for open space protection programs. It's a really nice little document, and I'll drop it in the chat so you guys can take a look at it. But it kind of goes into the intricacies of all the different ways that the rules are different for municipalities versus, say, someone like the Finger Lakes Land Trust, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So if some properties would be just simply donated and some would be purchased, that might change the way that we would want to kind of grade them or rank them. And now that that's part of the conversation, I can see why you would want to have some base criteria.
Or maybe there's a tax break.
Don't know.
An easement.
Is this feeling premature? Like we're getting this ahead of the open space index and then the other tools that need to exist before this does?
No, we put that question to you, CJ, and you're like, no, this is a good tool to have. This is marvelous.
Yeah, I think it's wise to start thinking through this. I mean, that's why you guys are getting ready to undergo the open space index and conservation plan to be able to, I mean, I would guess at some point the CAC would probably kind of break into a subgroup that would be doing probably just conservation easement consideration, right? A few of you say that a landowner came forward and said, hey, I'm really interested in donating my lands to the town, and then you would work with that individual landowner to review this criteria and essentially make the case to broader CAC, and then of course the town board. The town board has to be, of course, convinced of the value of this, and to part of the degree, of course, my department as well has to be convinced of the value of it, because we're the ones going to be holding the bag on this forever and ever. Amen. And forever is a mighty long time.
So what's the next step with this?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking everybody.
Well, one thing I think we should do is, Robin,
yeah, I think the very first next step, comments, and then I don't know who this goes on to next. Yeah, that's a good question, Tom.
I think at the least we should capture some of this, the last 5 or 10 minutes of conversation, just with a couple of notes, so that we don't forget that before it becomes a viable tool, there are a number of things that will need to happen, but we probably need to look at this issue of developability and also whether it's being being given or sold. And I'm not sure that we actually have to like solve those tonight, but having had the conversation, it'd be a shame to lose those threads.
So CJ did make that comment about it being developable and
Right.
the real public benefit. So that is in here.
Can we copy that, Robin, into the more final document that you have, just so that we don't, maybe you have it in there already, but I don't want to lose that.
What I have in here is this kind of general, like, reminder about CJ's reminder here about what the main function of it is and the enforcement and monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
As just a reminder to keep that in mind. But I will put maybe I will put it at the top where it's not so hidden. But we do want to have some base criteria, it sounds like, if town money is going to be spent. And maybe we need to revisit the minimum.
Like, town money is going to be spent in what way? For lawyer fees to defend the easement, not to buy the easement? Or are we expecting that we will be purchasing these easements?
It's possible that we would be purchasing parcels and applying these criteria.
Wait, purchasing parcels or doing conservation easement?
I think to evaluate whether a parcel is worthy of being protected in the distant future, I would imagine we could be using this matrix. Am I off base on that?
Well, there's fee simple purchases, and then there are conservation easements. And we're talking about conservation easements where we would own the development rights, but CJ, really, it has to be a developable parcel. It can't be something that, I mean, is developable meaning putting a house on it, or is developable including logging? Because that's,
That's a good question.
when we're
And
talking
I don't
about,
know.
if we're talking about watershed protection, setting standards for logging or, I mean, all kinds of stuff, I think is a completely valid reason to have a conservation easement on land, not just, can it have a house lot carved into it? But I guess it depends on how you're defining the resource. So that really, I think that really asks us to take a really giant step backwards about how we're defining ourselves and this task, beyond how many points anything gets. I think this is incredibly fundamental.
Yeah, I put a comment in the chat. I'm sure you saw me typing it. So I'm sharing my screen. I was confused by that too. I think I was taken aback by the comments about acquiring land or using town funds. I just don't understand, but that wasn't part of my understanding of what a conservation easement was. So maybe this task was above what I was understanding it to be, like not following. I think, Karen, you sound surprised, and I felt surprised. So maybe this is a good time to take a step back.
I mean, I think if we're talking about ag land, which is the only conservation easements that we have currently in the town, those generally are purchased easements, but natural lands typically are not. And sometimes that's just a financial consideration. But if you're taking ag land out of complete control of the person who is making their living farming that land, then yes, that is often how why the purchase of development right program for the state does involve a considerable transfer of money, and we're talking like close to $1 million for a lot of the PDR projects in the area. So,
but Karen, it's not a transfer of ownership.
No, I never said it was transfer of ownership.
Okay, well, it sounds like we're talking about
it's transfer. It's the rights to do what they want on their land, agriculturalists. I never said
the government.
Transfer of ownership.
Okay, but the government pays them to do or not do something with their land, and they have to document what they've done. There's that part of it. There's also changes in deeds. I know my grandparents had a Native American burial ground on their land, and something in their deed said that part of their land could not be developed, and they had some sort of a tax write-off. I don't like to call it a write-off, but there was some sort of like that land wouldn't be considered ag land or developable land, so it changed their tax criteria as well. So I think, but I think that I think Robin's exactly right, that we don't exactly know what these easements are going to entail. What actually how do they manifest themselves in the rights of the landowner and the rights of the town, or taxes, or whatever. I don't think we're offering compensation necessarily, but again, I really don't know.
So where does the money transfer come in an easement then?
So I may be confusing the issue back. Sorry, maybe I just didn't understand initially that this was going to cover only conservation easements that would be donated to the town. I think maybe I was ahead of myself.
So the town would take ownership?
No, I mean to say that the conservation easements themselves would be a donation rather than the town purchasing the conservation easement. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, but they're donated. Okay. But why would anybody want to ever donate something to the town?
That's the way the land trust operates. I don't believe that the land trust has ever paid for a single conservation easement. In fact, people pay them.
Right.
And I'm just, so I'm just basing it on that experience, and they're over.
Okay, they paid them. What do they get back?
They get back the peace of mind that their land is going to be that when they're gone, that land will remain in a protected state because the land trust owns that.
Well, when you say land trust owns something, what does that mean?
They own the development
it's a tired old analogy, Todd, but property rights can be thought of as a bundle of sticks, and you have many different sticks in the bundle. One of them might be the right to log. One of them might be the right to develop, put a horse stable on. Another one might be the right to build a house. The development rights on a certain set of those pieces of what makes up the rights of property ownership are what are donated. The ownership of the parcel itself remains in private hands in a conservation easement. The right to develop certain aspects of it, which could be logging, which could be whatever, is what is that's what makes up the conservation easement. And that conservation easement is held by an outside entity, and that could be the town, that could be the land trust.
Okay.
It could be, I don't know. There's probably other entities that could hold it, but it's a second party who is responsible. Although the ownership itself of the land stays in private holding, but that landowner would no longer have the right to let's just say randomly log, if that is one of the rights that is included in the conservation easement. I'd really, I think it would be great for everyone to take a look at the Danby template, because it lays it out really, really clear, and I think it's quite relevant to what we're thinking about. And those templates are, not cast in stone. They're a framework and can be changed, but there's the types of things that are part of the easement, part of those restrictions, that kind of you can call it a covenant, but the conservation easement has actually got a lot stronger teeth to it than that deed restriction on your grandparents' property. But I'm really glad that was, that was called out. Deed restrictions are not legally defensible in the way that conservation easements are.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification, Karen. That makes a lot of sense.
Anyway, I think what Robin's done is put together, a nice starting place for some criteria. And I don't think we should, just Robin put this in her little folder. I think we should say this is a draft way of evaluating proposed conservation easements. And then maybe instead of having all the different columns of comments by various individuals, just a few of these highlights we've talked about, above at the top of this document, with some bullets indicating some things still to be discussed, still some issues still to be developed. But
that sounds good.
Yep, I agree. Let's put this one to bed.
So we're not starting from scratch, and somebody else has to do this all over again. So
what are the issues that still need to be discussed?
One is about, because it's public funds being used, maybe this isn't thoroughly encompassed in this document. Should we have a very strict minimum, or is it appropriate how we've applied points to, I don't know, just
Developability, I think, is still an unresolved issue.
Well, why don't we take this document and put it together more like what David's suggesting, and then we need more of a text section at the beginning.
Yeah, saying it's a draft.
Yeah,
a draft, and there's some things left, still possibly left to be discussed. But so we're not just starting all over, and somebody else gets. Robin says, "I'm not doing it anymore. I did it," and then somebody else gets the job of trying to start from scratch. And let's not keep redoing things here. So it's a great.
Yeah, I think we're pretty close to having something that we can use.
Yeah.
And I think input from whatever consultant we hire might be useful also.
These 3 questions sort of capture the 3 main things that still need to be resolved.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Minimum acreage, do we want to put that back as an issue, or did we settle that?
Well, just to comment on the first part, should we have different criteria for Cs that involve town funds? They're all going to involve town resources, because the town is going to be ultimately responsible in perpetuity. So I think however we move forward, because we're an advisory body to the town, and this document's going to be used, that's where we need to hammer this out maybe a little bit more with CJ, and maybe the consultants can shed some light on that.
Well, maybe we could just modify that number 1 by should we have different criteria dependent on the level of responsibility and cost to the town. Something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I could look at
And the cost to the town, of course, is the attorney's time,
Mhm.
because there's no way that any of these are going to move forward unless he has a really thorough review of them.
Mhm. Thank you, Robin, for all your work on this, and Karen for your work on it too.
Yeah, I'll try to like put the comments all together so I can go back through them and maybe they'll all be in the same place and incorporate Todd's feedback. And just
Point.
consolidate it. Yes. Okay. Well, this was informative. I feel like I learned some additional insights that would be useful to think about going forward. Anything else? Should I stop sharing?
I
Sure.
think this looks great. Great, Robin.
Yeah.
Really good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your work.
Thanks a lot, Robin.
How are we doing on the time here? I was just going to make a quick comment about there's a road going down to the base of the bridge on Salmon Creek. And it's owned by Tioga Construction, who is building the bridge. And there's been some discussion about, whoa, maybe we should put a kayak launch site there or something like that. And I'm just wondering if the Conservation Advisory Council has any thoughts on the idea of first of all, it's owned by the construction company and we don't know what they're going to do about it.
Their DEC is already in conversation about buying that from them.
Okay. So do you know what the DEC has planned?
I think that is still up for discussion, but my sense of it was a trail.
A trail, okay.
Yeah, so a parking area at the top and a trail down to the bottom.
Okay.
But I don't think that's been, it's there's a number of different components to the discussion and it's being brought up by a number of different parties, and CJ may also have some insight to this, but as I understand it, they've been thinking about this for a while, and I think the discussion is kind of underway, and a trail sounds like a great idea. I just don't, I think it'll sort of remain to be seen whether for safety and maybe evacuation, whatever, that there has to be some sort of a road. But right now, I think it's just a trail.
I thought that originally DOT said that it was supposed to be restored as near possible to its natural condition.
But I guess if DEC is involved, then that could be negotiated.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but you're saying they're talking about a trail and not keeping a road open down there.
You know anything more, CJ? No.
Because that would be one high maintenance road. That's pretty steep road.
It'd be a pretty underutilized trail too.
Yeah, I think Pat was gonna fill you in on some details, but Karen, that's pretty much it. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so CAC really doesn't need to get involved with that at the moment, right? Okay. And now the big topic of the night, the open space index and the proposals that we've received.
Tom, are we going to skip the Climate Act draft scoping, or
Oh,
maybe just like spend a very quick minute
Okay,
on it? I don't know
sure.
if they want to introduce that or not.
we can talk about that.
Just super quick. I think, CJ, you felt like it would be important for the CAC to at least be aware of the Climate Act draft scoping. And if we did have comments, I think you put it in the context of potential.
Send them to
crypto-
me.
Sorry?
I said send them to me. If you have comments on the Climate Act draft scoping plan, please send them to me. If you'd like to compile comments on behalf of the Conservation Advisory Council to be included with the town's comments, we're working to coordinate with Tompkins County Planning and Sustainability on this. Now, actually, as the comment period is open till early May, there's just, I was essentially surprised to see very little language about all kinds of different technologies that are emerging in the energy market. They were pretty much totally absent from this plan, which is very confusing, given it's the basis and the framework for CLCPA, which is the DEC is changing all of its secret criteria based on this. So please take a look. This is a major document that the state is undertaking public comment on, which I think is open until May 1st. So comments from any or all of you are coordinated through Carrie. It's great. Thank you.
How does this relate to the solar thing that was an issue? The ramping up the solar in upstate New York?
That's a good question. I think they've gone through, I think they've included some of that language in here. I haven't dug into it very deep, but I can say that right now we're waiting to see about those two, at least as far as the town of Lansing is concerned. We're waiting to see about those two utility scale projects that are currently in the queue for us. So that's the 160 megawatts Yellow Barn solar project and the 200 megawatt Silverline Energy Center project. So my guess is that the climate action plan is going to be pretty super stoked about renewables through and through, but I think there's not a lot of nuance in there about the technology of marrying renewables to the grid and what that's going to look like in the future and what kind of technology is going to enable that. So anyway, but please look at it from your perspective and send comments.
Okay, so we'll leave that up to individuals to take a look at that and send comments. And if we want to discuss it at the next meeting, that would probably be the last chance before things will be due. They're due at the beginning of May. Does that sound reasonable?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, so just a day ago, we got the proposals for the open space index, and I'm guessing that most people have not had a chance to look at them. So I think it's going to be hard to discuss them at this point.
But we could talk about the process a little bit, Tom.
Okay.
And also the matrix. I had a couple questions about the matrix, and maybe other people do too. And given that we're going to be using this matrix to kind of refine our decisions, maybe we should go into executive session anyway.
Okay.
Sure.
Anybody want to, are you making a motion to go into executive session?
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Do we have any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
All right.
Todd and Karen, are you in favor?
Aye.
Okay.